hello everyone and welcome to today's session. As mentioned, my name is Zoiey Smale. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm an inclusion and diversity consultant for a company called Inclusive Employers that I sit within the sports team. So I have the absolute privilege of working across the sport and physical activity sector, which if you'd have asked me, is that achievable about 20 years ago, I'd have said, no, absolutely not. But let me kind of set the scene for you. I have been involved in sport and physical activity longer than I'm willing to admit. It's over 20 years, and I've had a really unconventional way of entering into the world of sport. So my entry into it was at primary school when my school teachers told my parents I needed to fail at something. So already, I had the odds stacked against me. So my mum was like, you know what, she's quite academic, yet this is good holistic learning for her. Let's put her into sports. I have quite a tenacious and competitive nature, which was ingrained from a very, very young age. So actually, what was designed to set me up to fail actually gave me ultimate success. So I was able to work through the grassroots system right up to high performance. I was able to represent Great Britain in international competitions. But actually back then, a career as an athlete for a woman, it's still not fantastic now. But back then it was just unheard of. So I knew very early on that actually I couldn't make a career out of being an athlete. Now, I come from a long line of medics, and everything in my family is academia, academia, academia. So, first priority is school and education. Second priority, school and education. Third priority, school and education. And then sport kind of sits down there, even representing your country, right? My parents were still like, you still have to go to school though. You still have to study. So whilst my fellow teammates were living, their best life in their GB tracksuits, I had my books because I promised my parents that if they allowed me to participate and do my sport, I also had to get the good grades as well. But when I was about sort of 13, 14, where, I was really beginning to struggle with the pressure. And again, I didn't realize until actually as an adult that I internalized a lot of pressure, especially when you are the first or trailblazer. Like I didn't really have anyone to look up to. So my motive is if I can't see it, I have to be it. But when you are the first, then I really notice it now and more recently when people say, so what is it like to be the first? And I'll go into my other parts of what else I do. You don't ever really realize just the amount of impacts that you can bring to someone's life. So anyway, let me go back to my story. So 13, 14, I was like, okay, my parents have said that they weren't going to pay for my fees anymore. I was desperate to stay in sport. I really found the value of sport. I saw the things that it brought holistically as a person. So like team building skills. I saw that actually it set me up. So I was curious about certain things. Like it brought a whole different enrichment to my life that I just didn't get at school. I didn't really fit in at school. I was the only person of colour within my school. I grew up in Devon. So again, it's a really white, densely populated area. I didn't really feel seen, but I did feel seen at school, if that makes sense, in a backhanded way. But at sport, I really almost found my voice through what I could bring through determination and my skill and talent that I had then developed. So for me, I thought, what can I do to make sure that I am still involved in sport? So I begged my coach to let me volunteer, something that I still hold really close to my heart because I think volunteering is the backbone of sport and physical activity and society as well. So whilst I was trying to study for GCSEs, do my whole career, also train consistently because it's a real tough gig to train full time as well, especially as a child, strength and conditioning is so, so tough, like having to be motivated and then also do my coaching qualifications as well. It was quite a lot to juggle, but we still did it. We still made it. So on my 13th birthday, I passed my exam. Back then you could do it when you're 13. Now you have to be 16, but back then you could do it. It shows my age now. I passed, I volunteered, and my club allowed me to volunteer some hours and I didn't have to pay for my training. So again, we're looking at the disparities there. And I really kind of saw so many barriers through going from grassroots coaching right up to high performance. In my head, in my heart of hearts, I was like, if I aim for the Olympics, I've made it. Like that is my big overarching goal. And again, I was quite young. I was 16, coming on 16 now. So I was ending my career and I was really, really interested in what made a good team, what made an athlete happy, thriving. What were the key things that we really needed to understand about the human brain, about how we can motivate others? So again, I was studying, I got into university, I moved to Oxford, I moved away from my family, I was studying, I was working at the John Radcliffe, but I was also trying to train. I'd given up competitively now at this point, but I was kind of still really focused on how can I bring out the best in people? And that's always been my motive. How can we meet people where they are? How can we bring out the best in people? So again, I was kind of studying and I was 4 years into my degree, quite pivotal. And I decided after a really negative experience, I couldn't do it anymore. I could not continue along medicine. My mental health was taking such a toll. I wanted to win all the time. And unfortunately, in medicine, we can't win all the time. So I knew actually I was internalizing a lot of stuff. I was really confused. Again, like mental health, poor mental health just wasn't ever really spoken about in my family. It's still really, I don't think, spoken about in some communities as well. It really wasn't spoken about. So I was really confused and I got to breaking point. And at that moment, I remember picking up the phone to my mum and telling my mum, I was in pieces. And I just said to her, I can't do this anymore. I really want to work in sport. And she did standard, mum. She put the phone down. So I was like, right, I have really upset my mum. So again, it would have been different for me to kind of say to her, you know what, mum, I'm not going to become a doctor, but I'm going to be a lawyer. Like that was a bit more palatable, right? But I was like, I'm not going to do this. I want to work in sport. Now, again, we're seeing a slight shift now in opportunities available for women and girls, especially Black women in sport. But again, back then, unless you worked in football or a footballer or a male, your options were really, really limited. So I spent a decade really trying to craft my career. Again, I've had no role models to look up to really. I found, I think, every single barrier that I came up against. And that was when ED&I kind of really entered chat. I was been doing ED&I long before it was given a fancy title. And the motive was because of every barrier that I had to face and fight for in the process of getting the career that I have today. So I worked and I was really, really lucky and very, very privileged to have a cycle working from London 2012 to Rio 2016 in the Olympic cycle working as a high performance coach. So again, I kind of worked up, I'd made it, I'd done it. I was working with athletes. I was looking at understanding how to support them as best I could, how to bring out the best. And then we had, 2012 was a real pivotal moment for our athletes, for UK home great athletes. So it was absolutely iconic, but I realized the sacrifice. We talk about the mental health of athletes, but we forget sometimes the pressure and how you have to hold it together as a coach. We still don't talk about that enough. So again, I was kind of struggling. I was trying to hold everything together. Right? My job was to create the next generation, right? But what support was available for me and fellow coaches? And there really wasn't anything. Anyway, I made that choice to kind of step away from coaching and thought, you know what? I want to learn something else. I want to try something else. So I went on and did my officiating exams. I had to do my officiating exams twice. The first time I passed it, flying colours, 94%. They made me do it twice because they didn't believe that I got what I did without cheating. I got more the second time round. Again, shows you the barriers that you're up against. I was really burnt out because as an official, you are exposed to all forms of misogyny, misogynoir, discrimination, abuse. People get really passionate and heated in the moment and shout stuff. Again, thought I need to make a change. What can I do? So I moved into working for national governing bodies around sort of development roles, because for me, why would you not want more people involved in sport? how can we make things more accessible? How can we make sure that our policies are inclusive? How can we get sport to be a real vehicle in moving society forward and educating? Like, this should be available for everybody. And I saw very early on that it wasn't. So again, was working in inclusion roles and development roles. And then I worked for a few active partnerships. And then I was really, really lucky in my company that I work for now, approached or poached, depending on how you look at it, asked me to become a consultant. I had to go through and do lots of testing, where I now have the absolute privilege of working across the sport and physical activity sector, trying to help change the narrative. Alongside that, I also do a work in sports media. I try and create safe spaces for Black women in sport to have a community, because again, you feel very isolated. And when we first started creating that network, we had maybe 2 or 3. It's now grown to 50, and I have absolute high hopes that we are going to expand again as we recruit more Black women within the sport and physical activity sector. That's a kind of real whistle-stop tour, although quite long. I was really keeping an eye on time. I could talk for hours and hours and hours about my life, my journey, and everything else in between. I can see that there are a few hands up, but I'm really open to questions. But one thing that I think really keeps me going is I never stop learning. I never stop seeing myself through other people's eyes. When you're in the moment, you don't realize how much you just being present in a small little bubble screen on Zoom or in a room can have on other people. And you never know the power of conversation. So I do advocate for it. I do advocate for listening.